In Colombia, in the 1970s, there was a young man named Pablo Escobar. When he was younger, he worked his way into drug smuggling gangs, mostly by kidnapping people and holding them for ransom. In 1976, he founded the Medellin cartel, which smuggled powder cocaine around the world, and by the 1980s, they had control of nearly 80% of the global market. At the height of its power, the Medellin cartel was bringing in $70 million a day, making Escobar one of the wealthiest people in the world. Eventually, Escobar would submit to the authorities, but he would escape from prison, and he would finally die in a running gunfight the day after his 44th birthday. Naturally, his life and memory are controversial. As a drug-smuggling criminal, he was ruthless and brutal. He's responsible for the murder of tens of thousands of people, including countless innocent civilians, hundreds of police, and politicians. As a billionaire, he was a philanthropist who donated millions to small, poor communities to build schools and parks and to help lift people out of poverty. Because of this, the legacy of Pablo Escobar is multifaceted. His life still influences the Colombian government and policing, and even the drug cartels today only exist as they do because of the fallout from Escobar's death and the collapse of the Medellin cartel. He's remembered fondly and he's mourned in the small towns that he helped, but he's hated by the people whose families he shattered and destroyed. But his legacy doesn't end here. When Pablo was at the height of his power and really having fun with his blood money, he had a private zoo on his estate at Hacienda Nápoles. Inside this zoo were all manner of exotic animals, creatures from all over the world that Escobar imported, so that he and his family could watch them and enjoy their natural beauty. It was also a status symbol, as it took considerable financial resources to own and keep healthy a diversity of exotic animals. Now, among these creatures were 4 massive hippos. When Pablo was killed and his estates were being raided by the Colombian government, the hippos were too big to move, so they were just left there. Naturally, the hippos did what animals do, and by 2007, they had quadrupled in number and spread out to the nearby forests and grasslands and the shores of the Magdalena River. With no official owners, these were the only wild hippos in all of South America. By 2014, the population had reached 40 hippos, all descended from the original 4 that Pablo owned. They began to get media attention, being the subject of a National Geographic documentary called Cocaine Hippos. And by 2018, the population had grown upwards of 60 hippos. And by the end of 2019, so very recently, a study estimated the presence of between 65 and 80 hippos, with the potential for the population to grow to 150 over the next decade. So, is this an invasive species? And if it is, how has it affected the local ecology? Well, first, we have to look at the lifestyle and the behavior of a hippo to understand how it will affect the wild world that it lives in. We know that hippos are mostly nocturnal. At night, they wander onto land, where they graze on grass, and during the day, they'll retreat into the water of a lake or a river to cool off and relax. They're also very large animals, and they require a lot of food. They're herbivores who eat a large amount of grass every day, and this produces a lot of nitrogen-rich waste. And when you eat a lot, you produce a lot of waste. And when the hippos poop into a river or a lake, this waste provides nutrients to algae and bacteria, and this can create an explosion in the growth of a bacterial colony or an algal bloom. These algal blooms can cause illness in animals that consume them, even inadvertently. A fish that swims through an algal bloom, even if it keeps its mouth closed, some of that algae is going to sneak in through its gills, and that can cause an infection. The algal blooms also consume a lot of oxygen. They just suck it right out of the water, and they deny it to other marine life, which in turn may suffer and die in the now oxygen-depleted water. A new study published in the journal Ecology analyzed the effects of these hippos on the local Colombian ecosystem, specifically near the Magdalena River. they found that the hippos are indeed stimulating ecological consumption of oxygen by providing nitrogen in their poop. You see, bioavailable nitrogen is often a limiting nutrient, so when a lot of nitrogen is introduced, all of a sudden it's not a limiting nutrient anymore, and there's a huge spike in metabolic activity until some other limiting nutrient is found and slows everything down. It's too bad that some of the microbes that benefit from this are harmful to larger organisms, either through ingestion or secondhand, as the microbes consume oxygen, which makes it harder for fish and crustaceans and other marine organisms to breathe. On top of this, when the hippos do their daily wandering, it's also physically restructuring the coastal area, pushing down sand and mud and chewing up grasses, which affects the root dynamics and the stability of the soil surface. We really need more time to see where this goes. The hippo population is still relatively small and very concentrated, so larger ecological trends may still be able to overpower any destructive behaviors from the hippos. There's been some argument among conservationists and environmentalists as to whether or not the hippos are having a positive or a negative ecological impact, but one thing is known for certain. The population is expected to grow rapidly, and with that will come a greater ecological impact, for better or for worse. Jonathan Shurin is a biology professor at UC San Diego, and he was a lead author of the study. He said, quote, "If you plot out their population growth, we show that it tends to go exponentially skyward. In the next couple of decades, there could be thousands of them. This study suggests that there is some urgency to deciding what to do about them. The question is, what should that be?" Unquote.